what was your critique of me? What was the issue? I didn't quite follow. I didn't follow it even from people.
You seemed really hyper. Like, I don't know what was happening there. I was just like, why is Mark like, you were defending Kamala Harris. It was the conversation that you had with Candace Owens on Piers Morgan's show.
Yeah, with Lamar and Candace. Yeah.
Yeah. And you just seem very hyper and wanting to defend Kamala. It felt over the top to me. And so I was just kind of like, what is going on with Marc Lamont?
Which part felt over the top?
Huh?
Which part felt over the top?
Your debate between Candace about whether or not Kamala Harris was Black, and Candace was talking about how Kamala is changing her accent depending on who she's around. And you got really energized there. And you were just kind of like, no, stop. She is Black. It was just kind of, I don't know.
So you're talking about my actual, but I thought you were saying that the argument itself, I thought you were saying I was making a particular argument or claim that was over the top. You're saying you just thought I was too exuberant in my defense of her.
You seem pretty hyper. I thought to myself, maybe Mark had a lot of caffeine. I don't know what was happening that day. But, I've talked about that as well. I haven't talked about it as much as Candace has. Candace has done a whole investigation into Kamala Harris's background. What I will say, and what I've explained to people on my show, is that when people say that Kamala Harris is not Black, what they're saying is that she's not an American descendant of slavery. That is the message that people are trying to get across. It's not because she's biracial and all this type of stuff. That's not what that's about. That's what people
disagree with. Disagree. So just for context, and people here know because they were with me the night before. I did do a lot of caffeine and stuff because I'd been in the hospital the night before. My son had been hospitalized that night, and so my audience knew because I was there with them. And I said, "Hey, I can't do the show tonight. I'm at the hospital." I ended up doing the show that next day, the same day I did Piers. And they sent a truck for me. Piers sent a truck for me to do the interview in the truck. And so I did charge up so that I could do the interview. And the interview was not supposed to be about Kamala Harris or anything else. So I was also sort of my agitation wasn't that somebody was attacking Kamala Harris. It was that I was being sort of ambushed with a series of topics that had nothing to do with it. I was told I was coming to talk about Diddy. I was told that I was coming to talk about Diddy, and then 5 minutes before they said we're adding another topic, and I said, "What's that topic?" They said reparations, which, if you watch, we never got to. Right. So to suddenly have these, and no one told me Lord Jamar was showing up at all. It would be like if right now you popped up and suddenly I said, Sabrina, you're going to tell me LeBron or Jordan right now, and then I just bring in like Dwayne Wade, and now suddenly you're having this debate about basketball that you may know everything about, but you just didn't come on to talk about it. And then all three of us are kind of ganging up. And I think the other thing for me, my frustration with, and again, I was agitated for lots of reasons that had nothing to do with them, but it was also that Candace is allowed to give full answers and every sentence gets interrupted. I couldn't get a thought out. And so it's like a dog pilot, and I find frustrating. It's just not the way I do TV, and I don't do TV anymore. For that reason. It's not that I don't get invitations. I mean, some places I don't, but there's lots of TV I don't do because I don't enjoy that. I don't enjoy that part of it. But I think I do have a particular irritation. On top of that, I do have a particular irritation with the Kamala Blackness debate. I disagree with you. There are people who say she's not a descendant of slavery, but that's not what a lot of these people are saying. Even Candace, that's not what Candace is saying. Candace is saying she's literally not Black. They're saying that she's Irish and Indian. There are people
that comes from her dad. Her dad wrote an essay for people who are not aware. Her father wrote an essay that said that he is Jamaican and Irish descent. So that's where a lot of that started for Candace, was that essay that was written by her father. So there's that. And just to be clear, so people understand, you can be Jamaican and not be of African descent.
That's my point. And that's what they're saying is her. So they're not just, that's what I'm saying. They're not saying that she's just not ADOS or FBA. They're not just saying she's not a descendant of slavery, but they're not saying she's like a Black person. They're not saying she's Harry Belafonte, right? They're saying your mama ain't Black, she's Indian, and your daddy is Jamaican, but he's not a Black Jamaican. He's not an Afro-descendant Jamaican. He's Jamaican through India and Ireland and all these other places. And so therefore, you're not black at all. You're just pretending to be black and then putting on the kind of cover of blackness through Howard, through AKA, through all these other things that I know you talked about. I watched that part of your video. And I think for me, that's a problematic debate for lots of reasons. One, I don't think that that's true. I think she actually does have African ancestry, direct African ancestry through her Jamaican side. But also it reinforces that.
But you said you think. You don't really know.
I mean, I don't know yours either, right? I don't. How would we know other than what she tells us? She tells us she does, and she's given us her genealogy. So why would I?
Where's Donald? Where is Donald J. Harris, Mark? We need to ask this question. Where is Donald?
I think that's a great question. But if you remember, when people were asking for Obama's long form birth certificate, they were also asking for his brother and parents, and they saw and pointed to their absence as evidence that Obama was lying about his ancestry when in fact he wasn't. So I don't assume because someone's not around, because there's lots of reasons why you don't. Trust me, if I were president, you would not meet some of my family members, and it ain't because I'm lying about them being my family. It's some good reasons not to. So I don't assume that that's the thing. Again, I'm okay with people saying we want to know more, but people are claiming definitively that she's not. And even I saw on your Twitter pointing to her conversation with Shannon Sharp, where she talked about the kind of fictive family members as almost evidence that she was co-signing now, that she was conceding that she wasn't black, and that wasn't what she was saying at all.
Well, I think one of the points that I want to bring up is the issue with the grandmother, right? So this is something that Candace did talk about. Apparently did a lot of her research, and it's true. Like in Black communities, sometimes we'll call someone, auntie or, uncle or cousin that is not actually our cousin or our aunt. But I think what Candace was pointing out, to put that in your book and the picture and say, this is my grandma, it does give people pause if they already have question about your ethnicity, right? And
why do we think it wasn't her grandma? I mean, just for clarity's sake, why do we think that it wasn't her grandma?
Because according to the research that was done, what they were able to prove, at least on her show, is that woman, that woman's name, that person passed away in the 60s.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. But what I want to say also is this. Some of this is on Kamala Harris too, Mark, because for a long time, Kamala Harris allowed for people to call her first Indian. And I think people forget this. Like when she was running for the Senate, I played this video on my show multiple times. When she was running for the Senate, a reporter said to her, so if you win, you will be the first Indian female senator. And she said, yes. She didn't correct him and say Indian and Jamaican. And that was the case for quite some time. So part of that is on her too. And for anybody, who comes from me or whatever, I have biracial members in my family as well. They don't do that. So I think some of that is on her as well. Yeah, it does give people the impression, today I want to be Indian, today I'm going to be Black. Like, yes, it will give people that impression.
Yeah, so I know you're a serious person who does investigation. The claims that Candace Owens has made about the woman in the book being dead before she was born have been debunked. There's no evidence that what Candace did was she did a sort of sleight of hand, assuming or getting us to believe that the woman that she did the research on did a name change, and that name changed woman was the woman who died. But if you actually follow the genealogy and do the research yourself, you'll see that nothing she said has been contradicted by that, by the book or by her family tree. It's just not true. And I'm not sure. I guess I wonder why you find Candace Owens is such a credible source for this kind of thing.
Well, first of all, I have a lot of criticism for Candace Owens.
But why do you find her credible on this?
Yeah, number one. But what I wanted to say is that I think it was an audience member who sent it to me, who told me about it. And I, again, not someone I usually watch, but I watched it just to see. I'm like, oh, okay, interesting. But I think I was interested because some of us had questions. And it just is what it is. And so to your point, if Candace is wrong about that issue with the grandmother, fine, it is what it is. That doesn't take away from Kamala Harris her fault in some of this. That doesn't take away from all of a sudden one day you're Indian American. And then this is the thing that people, they push back on Donald Trump for, but I actually agreed with that when he said all of a sudden one day she woke up and she was black, because you were allowing people to tell you that you would be the first Indian female senator. You didn't correct her.
Was she not? I mean, well, first, on the point, I don't want to stay here too long because again, I think like you, her blackness isn't the reason why you should or shouldn't vote for. I don't care.
No, it's not. But none of this would have been an issue if the Democratic Party didn't run on her identity. None of this would have been an issue if they would have just not mentioned the whole, she could be first black this, first, leave that alone and just focus on the policy and focus on the record. Yeah, this would have never been an issue.
I don't have an issue with that, but I also, at this point, it becomes a character issue, right? If she's pretending to be black or making up grandmothers or making up aunts, that would be deeply troublesome, right? And I think there's a million reasons not to vote for Kamala Harris. I just don't think this is one of them. And the reason why I got frustrated is because I don't think, in the same way that I got frustrated with Lord Jamar calling her the B word, it's like, there's room to criticize Kamala Harris without calling her that. There's room to criticize Kamala Harris without saying she's not qualified to run a Dunkin' Donuts. Is there an argument about qualification that could be made about any of these people? Sure. But he's not using the same measuring stick. He's saying Donald Trump's qualified and she's not. And I'm saying by that measuring stick, that's where it becomes problematic to me. And I will defend her. But I think it's unfair to characterize that as a kind of defense of her candidacy rather than a defense of Black women who are being, or whoever, depending on what the argument is, who are being assailed. For example, if Mayor Pete were running, and I hate Mayor Pete's policy agenda, right? I hated it, just like I hated Kamala's. But if people started throwing around homophobic slurs, I would say, hey, wait a minute. That ain't why you shouldn't vote for him, right? If people, I didn't vote for Obama, but if someone used the N-word and said that nigga's unqualified, I'd say, chill, right? And I'd go after them, and I still wouldn't vote for him, right? So I never told my audience that they shouldn't vote for her because of her ethnicity. No. What I'm responding to the idea or the curiosity around my vigorous defense of her on these matters. I'm saying no one's heard me defend her on policy. I'm only defending her on what I think are unfair attacks, because those unfair attacks don't just stop at her. But I would also just, as a matter of just facticity, I would say, yeah, she didn't just, because you say Donald Trump's right on this. Donald Trump's not right. I don't believe. She didn't just start calling herself Black when she ran for office. She was the president of the Black Law Student Association and in law school. That's why? And I understand that, but why didn't she make the correction? If a reporter is standing in front of me and a reporter says, "Oh, you could be the first," and I know that's not true, I am going to make that correction. And I think there's also something else. That's a different point.
So that's on her.
No.
That's on her.
I'm disputing something else. You're saying that she did not begin identifying as Black until she ran for office, and I'm saying that's factually untrue.
I'm saying when she was running for senator, before she was running for president in 2020, when she was running for senator, that's what I was referring to. That conversation.
I'm saying that's not the first time that she identified as Black. She identified as Black in college, in law school, as an attorney general, and there's evidence of this.
What I'm saying is she didn't at that moment when she was talking to the reporter. She did not.
Right.
He said to her face, "You'll be the first Indian American woman," and she said yes. She did not correct him.
I think we're talking about you said that Donald Trump is right. Donald Trump didn't say what you're saying now. Donald Trump said that Kamala Harris never identified as a Black person until she ran for Senate. And what I'm saying is Kamala Harris did identify as a Black person before she ran for Senate. If I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying at the moment that she ran for Senate, she allowed someone to frame her as an Indian. That's a different argument.
For me, that was the first time I heard of her.
Right, but that doesn't mean, right, but Donald Trump's not saying what you just said. Donald Trump was saying that in her life, she identified as an Indian until she decided to run for president or Senate, excuse me. And I'm saying, I'm willing to engage your argument fully. But what I'm saying is I don't think it's a good idea to say that you're echoing Trump, because Trump's not saying that. He's saying something that's completely untrue and baseless. Now, your point, I think, is an interesting one, right? Which is you're saying that she allowed someone to call her she is an Indian American. Now, she could have said Indian and Black, And I do think that there's something cynical about being identified as an Indian. I don't disagree with you about that. I'm just saying I don't want to, but we shouldn't then usher in a whole other narrative that's not true. Let's just attack her for being cynical.
I think the thing is this, Mark. For those of us that are American descendants of slavery in this country, okay, and I'm not a part of. For people come for me. I'm not. I'm not a part of the ADOS organization. Although I agree with some of their positions, and I'm not a part of. Actually, FBA is not an organization. I don't know if people realize that, but it's not an organization, right? So I just want to make that very clear. But for those of us that are American descendants of slavery, there has been this type of push for whether it's in the political space, whether it's in the media space, for them to tell us who is us. And so the pushback that you're seeing from people, the pushback that came with, I think Obama always said he was, from what I remember, I think Obama always said that he was Kenyan and white, whatever. So I don't know if people come.
He's black. He's just not African-American. Yeah.
So I think for some of us in that particular group, it is kind of frustrating sometimes when they do point to someone like a Kamala Harris and say, this is this black woman, this black woman, and it kind of erases our struggle in this country. That's where the pushback comes from. And this is not, and again, whatever ethnicity, I don't care what Kamala Harris is, what she is, that doesn't determine whether or not I'm going to vote for someone. But I also think at the point, there is deep concern within the ADOS community in this country about people being put into positions that quote unquote represent us that are actually not us. And there does need to be a discussion about that. And I will say
that I agree with wholeheartedly. I think that it's not a coincidence that the two people who have the potential to be the first two black presidents of the United States are neither of them are descendants of slavery. And contrary to what people say on the internet, I'm a descendant of slavery as well. For some reason that becomes a contested conversation. And I don't know why, but it becomes like, he's not ADOS either. And it's not that.
Can I just make this point really quick as well? The reason why that is important. We have a different struggle. We had a different struggle in this country. And when I hear Kamala Harris say, her mom, worked and saved and she grew up middle class, I think it's important that people understand when you're coming to this country, particularly, especially if you're coming here to study. I was an academic advisor, so I'm very well aware of how this works. When you're coming to this country to study in the PhD program, and from what I understand, from what I read about Kamala Harris's mother, she came from a higher caste system in India. That means you had money to get here. You are already a step ahead of a lot of us that are American descendants of slavery in this country. You are already a step ahead of us. And we should not be erased. And this is what people have to understand. Our struggle is a different struggle. My grandparents, my great-grandparents, my great-great-grandparents come from the Carolinas. My family came from chattel slavery. That is a different struggle that we had to go through in this country to try to even gain some type of success, to try to even establish some type of generational wealth, which most of us do not have. That is different. So when people say she's just like you, no, she's not. Her struggle is different.
Agreed. And I would tell anyone who says she's just like us that she's not. I think, though, there are people who have your argument, and there are people who have a more cynical and devious plan, and then there are people who are, there are all these different positions, and they're all getting molded together. And so she ain't black means so many things to so many people, from conspiracy theory to just, she doesn't come from slavery.